In this video, I'll attempt to explain the entire Fallout's timeline in chronological order. There are a total of 6 games and 12 DLCs I'll cover today, and between the first and last game, the timeline spans more than 180 years. As you know, the Fallout games are heavily choice-driven, meaning that different players will experience the story differently and ultimately get different endings. To make this video simpler, I'll cover only one version of events. However, when there is a major choice to make, I'll let you know what some of the other possible outcomes could have been. So, without further ado, let's start with some backstory to help us better understand the Fallout world. Backstory. Although the first game in the Fallout timeline takes place in 2102, we have to start way before that in order to explain everything properly. After World War II, the tensions between the countries rose similarly to the real world. However, instead of rivalry between the US and Russia, in the Fallout universe, the rivalry was actually between the US and China. During this period, the US focused on developing its technology and nuclear power. Namely, they developed things like artificial intelligence and robotic assistance, which made this version of the US way more advanced than the real world. During this time, a company named Vault-Tec won many government contracts and was hired to create a network of bunkers known as vaults. It soon became America's biggest company and had a huge influence on the government. Anyway, with so much technological advancements, the nations also needed more natural resources, which caused significant tension. Due to this, ultimately, in 2066, the US declared war on China, which in turn led to China invading Alaska. Around the same time, a disease called New Plague started spreading throughout the US. In an attempt to find a cure for this disease, scientists began researching a drug to counter its effects. Eventually, they developed the pan-immunity virion, which proved to be effective against the plague. However, it had some side effects, namely increased muscle growth and brain activity. For obvious reasons, this caught the eye of the US military, as they wanted to use it to create super soldiers. This would begin the creation of what would be known as the Forced Evolutionary Virus, or FEV. In the meantime, tensions continued to rise up until October 23, 2077, the day the Great War took place. On this day, the United States was struck by a series of nuclear missiles, completely destroying the country and causing millions of casualties. Also, due to radiation, most of the land became inhabitable wasteland. Some very lucky civilians were able to make it to the underground vaults created by Vault-Tec, where they would survive the blast. During the collapse of society, several important events occurred. A group of US soldiers would abandon the army and form a paramilitary faction known as the Brotherhood of Steel. The remaining members of the US government formed a group known as the Enclave and took refuge at the Poseidon oil rig in the Pacific Ocean. Also, experimental species, such as Deathclaws, escaped from US facilities and caused havoc across the country. Yeah, it was total chaos. Years later, on June 27, 2102, a man named Richard Gray would arrive at Mariposa Military Base, where FEV research was being conducted. While exploring the facility, he would fall into a vat, causing him to mutate into a grotesque being known as the Master. This isn't too important now, but will become important when we cover Fallout 1. So, with the backstory out of the way, let's start with the chronologically first game in the franchise, Fallout 76. Fallout 76, 2102. Fallout 76 serves as a prequel to the entire Fallout series and takes place before the first main game. The events of this game take place 25 years after the Great War, in the year 2102. The game's title comes from Vault 76, which is the shelter where the player's character emerges from. The story begins with the Overseer waking all the residents up. This is a special day called Reclamation Day. The reason for this is because today, the residents of Vault 76 will go out to explore the wasteland, as the vault has been assigned with the mission to start rebuilding the world. The place they're going to try to rebuild first is called Appalachia. The player's character, who remains unnamed during the game, makes his first steps into the outside world while being in constant communication with the Overseer. We quickly learn that the wasteland is a dangerous place. According to several indications, there are hostile mutants and intelligent robots roaming around. Apart from gathering potential resources, the protagonist also hopes to connect to a group called Responders. As the name suggests, responders were people who would get called to help others in moments of crisis. Although the resident does not find anyone alive yet, he is able to find some recorded messages of a few old members through some computers. During the exploration of the wasteland, the protagonist is eventually forced to fight against a few enemies. The protagonist soon learns from the overseer that these beings are called Scorched. They are pretty much mutated humans who seem to be connected to one another via a collective consciousness. The Overseer blames the Scorched Plague for their mutation. She also adds that the responders were working on something that could be a cure. The problem with Scorched is that they will just keep attacking anyone, which will prevent people from making the world livable again. Therefore, the Overseer prompts the protagonist to start thinking about possible solutions to their problem, even securing some nuclear weapons and using them against the Scorched if needed. The protagonist assumes that the responders have fought the Scorched in the past, so he should find out more about what they know. As the game progresses, we learn that it's not only the mutants that can harm people. Everything in the outside world has changed due to nuclear radiation, and even the smallest animals have mutated into bloodthirsty flesh eaters. Upon doing some research, the protagonist finds out that the Scorched are led by their queens, which are called Scorch Beasts. The way the Scorched are organized pretty much resembles the structure of a beehive. So, if the protagonist can find the hive, he can cause larger damage to the Scorched compared to killing them one by one. Later, the protagonist stumbles upon a robot named Rose. Their conversation reveals that Rose was part of a gang, the Raiders, and it recalls the good old days when her gang used to cause mayhem. The gang was divided into 5 smaller units. Even though the Raiders used to rule this area, the nuclear attack broke them up, and Rose was forced to get away because of the Scorched. Rose sends the protagonist to a mine where one of the unit leaders was last seen. With a bit of luck, the resident might find some new info there. When the protagonist gets to the mine, he realizes that the gang leader has been mutated as well. After killing the leader, the protagonist finds an exoskeleton and wears it. With his new suit, the protagonist is better equipped, but he still has to be careful as the suit doesn't make him invincible. Later, the protagonist engages in a few small missions and eventually retrieves a few key fragments. The protagonist then finds a key card, and Rose scans his cache memory for information. Rose then guides the protagonist to find the place where a girl named Abby used to live. When the protagonist gets there, one of Abby's recordings is triggered. The recording discusses the detection system, which can spot Scorched when they approach. The recording instructs that the survivors have to find the missing uplink, which can probably be found at a place called Top of the World. Eventually, the protagonist fixes the uplink and triggers a new recording from Abby. This one is followed by several additional recordings, each one guiding the player to new quests in order to fix the detection system. At some point, the protagonist is guided to find some secret data concealed by a member of the American government before the Great War, a senator. When the data is collected, another recording of Abby is triggered. This time, the recording prompts its listener to find some firepower to maximize their possibilities of defeating the Scorched. Abby also talks about the Brotherhood of Steel, a group that possessed lots of guns. Unfortunately, even the Brotherhood of Steel could not defeat the Scorched. Abby is not aware of the Brotherhood's armory, but she gives the protagonist some clues to get him started, which leads the player to a new series of missions. While all of this is happening, the protagonist hears the Overseer in his ear again talking about the real reason everyone failed to defend their country. She thinks that all of these divergent groups, such as the Responders and the Brotherhood of Steel, had everything they needed. They had guns, they had guts, they had brains, but they also had ego. When the time came, they failed to trust each other and work together, which led to their destruction. As the game progresses, the player has to constantly fight off Scorched and even a few Scorched beasts while roaming different areas. Each time the player approaches a computer, they can selectively reveal new information. This information is presented in the form of text on the computer screen. Next, the protagonist visits the White Spring Resort, a bunker made for the richest people in America. The resident uses the data collected earlier to enter the facility and is welcomed by an artificial intelligence named Modus. Modus runs some scans on the protagonist while telling him that the AI was created by the Enclave. The Enclave was a unique group of VIP members with high influence. According to Modus, this group pulled the strings all across America. The Enclave had presidents, rich people, and award-winning scientists in its ranks. Since there's no sign of them anymore, Modus now operates on its own. Modus asks the protagonist to fix some damages it has suffered and connects the AI to an orbital platform. In return, Modus will connect to the detection system, which will allow the protagonist to spot the Scorched. Once that's done, the protagonist is able to use the detection system, while Modus also gives him access to 3 nuclear silos. The protagonist finds the Scorched nest via the detection system and launches a nuclear missile, destroying the nest for good. With the Scorched destroyed, the protagonist reunites with the other people from Vault 76 to finally start building the new world. Fallout 1, 2161. The events of Fallout 1 are set in 2161, and the game follows Vault Dweller, a human born and raised in Vault 13, somewhere in Southern California. As we already know from the previous game, the residents of Vault 76 had been tasked to rebuild the wasteland, but this is not the case for the rest of the vaults. All of the residents from the other vaults still live underground. After a short introductory cutscene, the story begins, and Vault 13's overseer wants to see the Dweller because they have a situation that needs to be taken care of. Namely, a computer chip responsible for pumping and filtering the vault's running water is broken down. They can't fix this chip, and they do not possess a second one to replace it. The Overseer estimates that the vault has only about 150 days of water supply. After that, they will all face extinction. Therefore, the Dweller has to find a new chip for the vault. The closest place where he can find another chip is Vault 15, so the Dweller gets started on his adventure. Before the Dweller gets out to the world, the player can interact with several characters within the vault. It is through these interactions that we learn that the Overseer has established a security team to guard the water portions because they need to be ready for all possibilities. The Dweller will also need some water out in the wasteland, so the player can grab some portions behind the guard's back. When the Dweller finally gets to the outside world, he can't help but realize that there are people already living in the wasteland. The first town the Dweller visits is the Shady Sands. Shady Sands is a village that seems pretty peaceful, but the villagers have to fight against a few groups of raiders. They're also being attacked by mutated scorpion rats, causing them some casualties. By interacting with a man named Seth, the Dweller learns that there's another city nearby called Junktown. Sheriff Killian is the man in charge there. Before heading there, the Dweller fights a few scorpion rats in their den in order to help the villagers. Here, the player can choose a companion. Soon, the Dweller makes it to Vault 15, but what he finds there is not good. In other words, Vault 15 is completely destroyed. The Dweller searches the entire vault, but the chip is nowhere to be found. Due to this, the Dweller now has to visit the Hub, which is the trading center of the wasteland, which seems like a suitable place to ask for a water chip. However, no merchant has heard of such a device. Afterward, the Dweller finally visits Junktown. Despite the ugly name, this city seems to be running on fair laws. The Dweller soon finds the sheriff, Killian, who tells him about the city of Necropolis, even though he advises the Dweller not to go there. As they talk, Killian is attacked by some gangsters, but the Dweller helps him survive. There is no doubt that this was an attack orchestrated by Gizmo, who is a local criminal. However, the sheriff can't make a move on Gizmo without solid proof. The Dweller offers to help, so Killian suggests he wears a recorder and make Gizmo confess on tape. So, the Dweller visits Gizmo and pretends to be a criminal. He suggests that he can kill Killian for a fair price. Gizmo doesn't trust him at first, but the Dweller manages to convince him and gets everything on tape. The Dweller checks back with Killian, and now the sheriff allows him to go back to kill Gizmo, which the Dweller successfully does. Later, the Dweller makes it to the next location, which is Necropolis. This is a city where only ghouls can live, who are humans mutated by nuclear radiation. The Dweller does some research and forces one of the ghouls to tell him where they draw their water from, since they seem to have a constant supply. The ghoul tells him that they draw the water from underground and talks to him about a watershed. The Dweller also meets a member of the Children of the Cathedral in the city. This member claims he is here to help the unfortunate ghouls by healing their bodies and spirits. As it appears, this group is seemingly devoted to doing good in the wasteland. Soon, the Dweller is captured by these super mutants. These super mutants are a different kind of mutants who have come to their mutation by being exposed to the forced evolutionary virus. The Dweller is then taken to a certain location to be questioned. These super mutants want to know about his vault's location, but the Dweller keeps his mouth shut. The super mutants threaten him that if he doesn't talk, they will expose him to a virus as well, which would make him one of them. However, this process would cause the Dweller to lose all of his memories, which is why mutants don't want to do it just yet. The Dweller is then stripped of his equipment, but he soon manages to find a way out and escape. Now, the Dweller heads underground, under the city of Necropolis, to search for the watershed. On his way, the Dweller discovers Vault 12. Same as the previous vault he found, this one is also completely destroyed and is overrun by ghouls. This means that Necropolis is getting its water from what used to be Vault 12. The Dweller has to kill the ghouls lurking around and then search for the computer chip. After successfully dealing with the ghouls, the Dweller finds the chip and finally heads back to his vault. The Overseer is very happy to see the computer chip and uses it to repair the water supply. The Dweller is asked to write a report on his expedition, and the Overseer is scared when he reads it. He believes that these super mutants are a threat to their survival, and therefore tasks the Dweller to find and destroy their lab. So once again, the Dweller returns to the wasteland and soon takes on a couple more missions. Soon, the Dweller finds a new place called The Glow and uncovers an underground lab. The Dweller also learns that this lab is connected to a person called Master. We already briefly touched on who the Master is in the backstory section, but since then, the Master has become the leader of the super mutants, whose goal is to turn every human into a mutant in order to bring unity to the wasteland. Anyway, after several encounters, the Dweller heads to the Mariposa military base with the goal of finding the vats containing the FEV virus, which is the virus Master uses to create mutants. The Dweller's goal is to destroy the vats to make sure that no more super mutants are ever created. While having to deal with various opponents, the Dweller finds the central computer and is able to initiate a self-destruction sequence. With this action, a part of the mission is completed since the vats containing the virus have been destroyed. However, the Master is still alive. Later, the Dweller finds the cathedral where the Children of the Cathedral group is located. The player can have conversations with a few NPC characters, and these chats reveal that the Children of the Cathedral actually love the Master. In fact, the reality is that this group has been created by the Master in order to bring more people in without the use of violence. The Dweller soon finds out that there's a vault under the cathedral. After fighting against a bunch of super mutants, the Dweller finally sees the Master for the first time. The Dweller and the Master talk, with the Master inviting the Dweller to join the super mutants. On the other hand, the Dweller tries to convince the Master that his plan is not going to work because super mutants are infertile. Even if he turns everyone into mutants, they are not going to be reproduced. However, despite this, the Master has no intention of stopping. So, the Dweller has no choice but to use the nuclear weapon to destroy the entire vault along with the Master. After the Master is killed, the Dweller returns to his vault, but the Overseer has been having some second thoughts. He recognizes that the Dweller has saved humanity with his actions, but he's afraid of how other vault residents will be affected by this. Basically, the Overseer believes that everyone will be viewing the Dweller as a hero, and they will want to copy him, which means they will potentially want to go out to the wasteland themselves. The Overseer does not want to lose the younger generations, so he exiles the Dweller. In the end, after everything he did, the game ends with the Dweller walking alone through the wasteland. Fallout 2, 2241. The next game in the Fallout series is Fallout 2. It has a similar gameplay to the first game and is a direct sequel to it. The story picks up in 2241, 79 years after the events of the previous game. The protagonist of the story is referred to as the Chosen One, and he is the grandson of the Vault Dweller from Fallout 1. After being exiled from Vault 13, the Dweller walked to the north until he found the Great Canyons, where he founded a village named Arroyo. Apparently, this village grew to have other people as well, but the narrator does not give any information on how that happened. Many years later, the village elder calls the Chosen One for a private talk to tell him that the village is slowly dying. The drought is not allowing the seeds to grow, while the children and the animals are falling sick. The elder talks about the Garden of Eden creation kit, which is said to be powerful enough to bring life to the wasteland. The Chosen One has to find this kit, but before he leaves on his quest, he has to prove that he's worthy. Therefore, the Elder sends him to the Temple of Trials. The Chosen One survives the trial and comes back to see the Elder again. The Elder only gives him a flask, a spear, and some money to aid him on his journey. She also speaks about a merchant named Vic, which hints to you as a player that you should probably find Vic and use the money the Elder gave you to buy a better weapon. The game unfolds in a similar fashion as the previous one. The player can navigate the place and speak to several NPCs until they find what they're looking for. Some of these NPCs give you the same information over and over because they're not really important to the quests. However, when you talk to the right ones, you'll learn clues about what you should do next. Anyway, the Chosen One has to travel to Klamath and then to the Den. As it appears, the Den is a place where the Slavers Guild is located. The guild captures slaves and sells them for profit. Along the way, the Chosen One searches for Vic, but nobody seems to know his whereabouts. The good news is that there are lots of merchants around, and the player can actually buy a shotgun instead of just sticking with the spear. Later, the hunt for the creation kit takes the Chosen One to the outskirts of a city called Vault City. This city has good security, and the Chosen One is informed that he will have to receive a day pass to enter. The pass will allow him to take a look around the city during the day, but he will have to leave as soon as it gets dark. The Chosen One insists that he has to talk to the leader of the Vault City, so he gets a pass for a day. Once he is inside, the Chosen One manages to find the leader, asking her for the location of Vault 13. She is reluctant to speak with the Chosen One, but the latter tells her that he is a descendant of the Vault Dweller. The leader does not believe him entirely, but she is more open to hearing him out. She reveals to him that the records of Vault City might have information about Vault 13, but only a citizen can access the computers of the city. She tells the Chosen One that he can go to meet a guy named Gregory, who is responsible for granting citizenship to outsiders. The Chosen One has no time for something like this, so the leader talks to him about some creatures that have been polluting Vault City's groundwater. If the Chosen One can deal with those creatures, he will be granted citizenship. The Chosen One then goes to the town of Gecko, which is inhabited by ghouls. He meets Harold and realizes that the pollution the leader of Vault City was talking about is coming from a leak in Gecko Town's power plant. Harold wants the plant fixed as well because not fixing it would mean his town will run out of water. The Chosen One goes back to the Vault City and tells the leader about this. He also asks her for a magnetic part he needs in order to fix the plant, which would solve both her and Ghoul's problems at the same time. However, the leader is not fond of the Ghouls, and she has no intention of helping them out. So, the Chosen One acts on his own and meets another character who gives him the magnetic piece he needs. After fixing the plant in Gecko, this same character also grants the Chosen One citizenship without asking the leader for permission. Now, the Chosen One has access to the computer archives and takes a good look in them searching for Vault 13, hoping that's where he can find the Garden of Eden creation kit. Later, the Chosen One roams around the city of Redding. There, he meets Marcus, a super mutant who claims he built this city. Marcus narrates his own story. When the Master died and the vats with the virus were destroyed, he was left all alone in the unknown. Having witnessed several so-called governments over the decades trying to rebuild the wasteland, he decided to build his own city in a different way. Others don't think much of Redding, but the people living here are more free than anywhere else. The good news for the player is that they can return to Marcus after they've completed a few quests and ask him to join them in their adventure. Marcus will then join the Chosen One and aid him in his journey. After some more exploration, the Chosen One finds the New California Republic, NCR for short. This is yet another city in the wasteland that is trying to function on a traditional hierarchy. The Chosen One manages to get a hearing from the president of NCR, Tandy. As it is revealed, NCR is what became of Shady Sands, a town from the previous game. Tandy is happy to share everything she knows with the Chosen One because she can see the resemblance to his grandfather, the Vault Dweller. She's so open with him because the Dweller had helped Shady Sands survive multiple gang attacks in the past. However, despite this, she has no idea where Vault 13 is, and can't really help him with that. Instead, she asks him for help because she needs some tech parts from Vault 15. The Chosen One agrees to help her, and while on this quest, he ends up finding the location of Vault 13 he's looking for on one of the computers. The Chosen One heads there next, only to realize that Vault 13 is filled with Deathclaws. However, the Deathclaws do not behave like aggressive animals anymore. In fact, they are intelligent. They can speak and read human language. The Deathclaws do not want to fight the Chosen One. Instead, they happily let him have the creation kit after the Chosen One helps them with some computer issues. The Chosen One then returns to Arroyo, believing that he will finally save his village, but the only thing he finds there are a few dead bodies. A dying old man informs him that dark souls came to the village and killed half of its inhabitants, while the rest have been taken away. These dark souls the old man talks about are members of the Enclave, the remnants of the old American government. The Chosen One has no way of finding the Enclave. However, he soon thinks of something once he finds the old oil tanker. He tries putting the tanker on autopilot and program it to go back to its base. The plan works, and the tanker takes him to the middle of the Pacific Ocean where the Enclave is hiding at an oil rig. Once the Chosen One is on the rig, he navigates around until he finds the village elder. She tells him that the men came in their village in a flying machine. Initially, she thought they were there to save them, but instead, the men killed most of the villagers by testing the mutant virus on them. The Elder prompts the Chosen One to find the machine that's fueling the magnetic prisons so he can open the cells. This way, she and the rest of the villagers who are still alive can escape. Of course, the Chosen One should also kill the members of the Enclave if possible. After some exploring, the Chosen One finds the President of the United States. President Richardson reveals that the vaults were meant to be something like a social experiment on a larger scale. For example, some of the vaults only had men inside, while other vaults were designed to have a shortage of food. As for Vault 13, it was designed to remain closed for 200 years, and then its residents would be used for virus tests. The President's grand plan was to use the virus they created to kill all mutated subhumans on the continent. The President believes that the Enclave is the last bastion of pure humanity and that anyone outside the Enclave couldn't be considered human. Before he put his plan into motion, however, the President is killed by the Chosen One along with his most trusted soldiers. Then, the Chosen One puts all the enslaved people on the tanker and sails away as the oil rig explodes. Eventually, the Chosen One uses the Garden of Eden creation kit to make his village flourish. Eventually, the Chosen One becomes the new elder of the village and helps everyone survive for the years to come. As for the other in-game locations, some of them survive, while others are destroyed by gang wars or a lack of resources. Fallout 3, 2277. Fallout 3 takes place in the year 2277, 200 years after the Great War between the United States and China. The protagonist of this game is the Lone Wanderer, a young man or woman, depending on your choosing, coming from Vault 101. We are first shown the scene of Lone Wanderer's birth, where we learn that his mother, Catherine, suffered cardiac arrest shortly after giving birth and died. Fast forward 10 years, and we can see the Lone Wanderer celebrating his birthday with some other members of the Vault. The Overseer gives him a Pip-Boy device as a gift because when Vault residents turn 10 years old, they are ready to take on some responsibilities for the Vault. The player can use this event to get acquainted with the mechanics of the game by talking to other characters and making dialogue choices. 9 years later, in the year 2277, the Lone Wanderer has turned 19 years old. On a day that looked just like the rest, one of his friends named Amada rushes to meet him. She warns him that her father's men are looking for him and that they already killed another man named Jonas. The reason for this is that they believe Jonas helped someone escape the vault. The Lone Wanderer is completely confused by this and doesn't understand any of it. Amada then explains to him that his father, James, escaped the vault. Although the Lone Wanderer had no idea that his father was planning to escape, Amada prompts him to escape the vault as well because her father is going to harm him. By the way, Amada's father is the leader of Vault 101. The protagonist doesn't know how to escape the vault, but Amada talks to him about a secret tunnel that leads to the exit. She instructs him to go to her father's office and hack the computer. This will open the passage so the Lone Wanderer can escape. The protagonist encounters some other residents on his way to the office, but none of them snitch on him because James has always been good to them. While wandering around the vault, the protagonist sees that the Overseer is questioning Amada about him. The Lone Wanderer barges into the room and kills the Overseer's guard, allowing Amada to flee. The Overseer tries to convince the protagonist to turn himself in by saying that he's only damaging the vault. However, the Lone Wanderer can't trust the Overseer because he has already killed Jonas. If he really wanted peace, he wouldn't act the way he is acting. In any case, the Lone Wanderer allows the Overseer to live and runs away. On the way, the Lone Wanderer receives a recording from his father. James wishes him to be well, saying that the protagonist is an adult now and he's ready to be alone. James also says that he left because there's something he has to do, but he doesn't give any more details about it. Another man is heard speaking to James, urging him to get back to work, and the recording ends. Soon, the protagonist finds the exit, and Amada is waiting for him there. The protagonist wonders if she will go with him, but Amada is staying in the vault because she believes that her people need her here. The Lone Wanderer then gets out to the wasteland for the first time. He immediately sees some people asking him for water, but he can't help all of them. The protagonist then finds the city of Megaton, and they allow him to get in. Sheriff Sims greets him, and the protagonist asks about his father. Sims has no idea about his whereabouts, but allows the lone wanderer to stay in the city because he likes him. Megaton is an interesting city because it has been built around a big atomic bomb. Most of its residents don't know that the bomb is still a threat, but the sheriff knows it very well. The protagonist offers to take a look at the bomb and see if it's possible to disarm it. Soon, the lone wanderer meets a man named Colin, who tells him that James passed through Megaton. He got something he needed and then went on his way. However, Colin reveals another detail. He claims that the lone wanderer was not born in Vault 101. He was actually born somewhere else, and James and his friend from the Brotherhood of Steel moved him to Vault 101 to make sure he would be safe. Anyway, after being prompted by Colin, the protagonist starts looking for the Galaxy News Radio and its host, Three Dog. His trip takes him to Capital Wasteland, which is what remains of former Washington, D.C. The protagonist meets Sentinel Lyons there, a member of the Brotherhood of Steel. Lyons informs him that the Galaxy Radio is constantly being attacked by the super mutants, so they have to get rid of them before they enter the building. The lone wanderer joins them in this fight and takes out several super mutants. Eventually, he enters the building and talks with Three Dog. This man is the host who runs the radio in the hope of helping people survive day by day. He believes that speaking some nice words to people might motivate them to fight. The people here in Capital Wasteland have to deal with lots of problems, such as famine, raiders, slavers, or super mutants. Everybody wants a piece of the pie. Three Dog also reveals that James was here. He came asking for information because he figured Three Dog would be the guy to have it. The protagonist wants to know more about his father, but Three Dog is reluctant to give him more intel. After some convincing, Three Dog agrees to help the young man and tells him that James was talking about something he called Project Purity. James said that he had to find a guy named Lee in Rivet City. The lone wanderer has never heard of Rivet City, but Three Dog gives him some directions on how to find it. The lone wanderer hits the road again, but before he gets to Rivet City, he passes through the underworld. We can learn some interesting lore in this area. Namely, Underworld is where the ghouls live. The ghouls are not facing any issues with the super mutants because the latter do not attack them. Maybe they view them as their kin or something. They also do not have any issues with the slavers because they don't usually come this deep into Capital Wasteland. However, they have some problems with the humans and the Brotherhood of Steel, who always attack them. Maybe they can't tell them apart from the super mutants, or they just don't care. After spending some time in Underworld, the protagonist moves to Rivet City and the guards allow him to see Dr. Lee. Lee reveals more of James's backstory. James and his wife Catherine were working alongside Dr. Lee on Project Purity. They were supposed to create a purifier that would be able to cleanse water, making it safe for everyone to drink. Then, Catherine died during the birth of the lone wanderer. This incident took a heavy toll on James, who decided to abandon the project and live in the vault with his son. Dr. Lee and her team abandoned the project as well and moved to other things. Apparently, Project Purity stuck with James all these years and he wanted to continue working on it, hence he escaped the vault. James came to see Lee after, but Lee told him that too much time had passed and there's no way that they can make Project Purity work. However, James told her that he could make it work and went to his old lab at Jefferson Memorial. Lee pleads with the protagonist not to go there because it is a dangerous place, but the lone wanderer doesn't listen to her warnings. He starts walking towards the Jefferson Memorial and has to face a few enemies on the way, some of them from the Regulators gang and some super mutants. Despite arriving there, the lone wanderer doesn't find his father, so he decides to have a look around. Next, the protagonist reaches Vault 112. A robot waits for him at the entrance and tells him that he arrived 200 years after the scheduled time. The wanderer is confused and doesn't know what the robot is talking about. Was it really expecting the lone wanderer, or is it taking him for somebody else? Anyways, the robot allows the lone wanderer to enter when he puts on the appropriate vault suit. Soon, the protagonist finds his father sleeping in a tech capsule, which induces the subjects into a virtual reality program. The lone wanderer can't just disconnect his father from the machine, as it may harm him. Therefore, the solution is to enter the virtual reality program himself and try to end it from within. Indeed, the protagonist hops into a capsule and is induced into the virtual world. In this world, everyone lives happily, but they have no idea that it's all fake. The lone wanderer starts damaging the program by punching a young boy, which causes the artificial intelligence system to reveal itself. The smart AI has been hiding under the cover of a girl named Betty. Betty tries to stop the lone wanderer because if everyone leaves, she will stay here alone. Despite this, the protagonist finds a computer and causes an attack on the virtual world. A few soldiers come to kill the people, but their virtual deaths only wake them up to the real world. The capsule's open and James is safe. Father and son are happy to see each other, but they have to decide on their next steps because they can't stay here for long. James believes in his old project and is positive that he can create the purifier if they find the Garden of Eden creation kit. The two men head back to Rivet City, and James tries to convince Lee to work with him again. Lee is against the plan, but James discusses how important it is to create something that will benefit the whole wasteland. James also talks about the creation kit and eventually persuades Lee to work with him. Lee gathers a small team, and all of them head back to the Jefferson Memorial Building. When they get there, a helicopter comes hovering above the building with a few armed soldiers attacking the team. The lone wanderer kills a few soldiers but realizes that his father's been trapped with some soldiers inside the main room. As it appears, these people are members of the Enclave. The leader of the soldiers, the colonel, asks James to stop everything he is doing, but the latter explains that the purifier isn't functional at all. The colonel's not listening to James and demands that all materials related to this project be obtained. The colonel kills one of Lee's scientists, and that forces James to comply. Or at least he pretends to comply, because he soon approaches the central computer and releases radiation into the room. Everyone in the room falls dead, including James. Although his father just died, the lone wanderer has to get over his death fast if he wants to save everyone else. Dr. Lee tries to tell him that their best chance from here is to try to reach the fortress of the Brotherhood of Steel. The group soon makes it to the fortress, and they're allowed to enter since their leader, Lyons the Senior, knows Dr. Lee. Lee tries to convince him to help her because it is dangerous to allow the Enclave to get their hands on the purifier. However, the leader of the Brotherhood says that the purifier doesn't work, so who cares if the Enclave has it? But it's here that Dr. Lee surprises everyone and reveals that James actually found a way to get it running. Still, Lyons doesn't worry too much about that, so Lee tells the protagonist privately that they will either have to convince the Brotherhood to help them or prevent the Enclave's plans on their own. The protagonist tries to pinpoint where he can find a creation kit and concludes that he should look for one at Vault 87. The lone wanderer gets out to the wasteland again and has to fight many super mutants until he gets to the vault. In the end, he successfully finds the creation kit device, but is immediately ambushed by the Enclave. As he is losing his senses, the protagonist barely sees Colonel Autumn asking if he's alive. When the protagonist wakes up, the colonel starts asking him about the codes that will initiate the purifier. The colonel presses the protagonist, but the interrogation stops when President John Henry Eden intervenes. The president asks the colonel to let the lone wanderer go, asking the latter to meet him in his office. The protagonist gets to the president's office only to realize that the president is an artificial intelligence program. Henry Eden wants to turn the protagonist to the Enclave's side, explaining that their actions will benefit humanity. Then, Henry outlines his plan. He wants the lone wanderer to grab a vial containing the FEV virus and put it into the purifier. The virus has been modified to kill everyone who's infected, but not pure humans. The purifier will then help the virus extend via the water. The more areas it reaches, the more mutants they will be able to get rid of. By the way, this has been the Enclave's plan for a long time. If you recall the previous game, the Enclave was trying to carry out pretty much the exact same plan. Anyways, the lone wanderer takes the virus and leaves the Enclave base behind, but as soon as he is out, he blows the Enclave to pieces. From there, the lone wanderer has to take his time before he returns to the Brotherhood of Steel because everything that's been going on has taken a toll on him. Before we continue explaining the rest of Fallout 3, we have a few DLCs we need to cover first. All DLCs, except Broken Steel, take place sometime before the end of the main game. So, to make it simple, we'll just cover all of them now. Fallout 3: Operation Anchorage. This DLC begins with the lone wanderer fighting for his life in the wasteland until he receives a distress signal from the outcasts of the Brotherhood of Steel. Once he gets in touch with Defender Sibley, he's taken to the leader of the outcasts, Protector McGraw. McGraw wants to acquire some pre-war weapons and technology, but the problem is that all of them are sealed behind a blast door. The only way to open that door is to complete a computer simulation, which is a hyper-realistic military training program. But to do that, they need somebody with a Pip-Boy because the simulation can't be entered without it. So McGraw makes an offer. The Lone Wanderer will enter the simulation to unlock the blast door, and the outcasts will share part of the gear with him. However, in case he dies inside the simulation, he will suffer a cardiac arrest and die for real. Next, the Lone Wanderer is taken to Specialist Olin. She explains to him that the simulation is all about Operation Anchorage. When the world was nuked, the Chinese invaded Anchorage, a city in Alaska, and the American soldiers had to take it back. The soldiers were trained for that intense battle in this simulation, so the Lone Wanderer will have to do the same. He will try to liberate Anchorage by defeating the Chinese invaders inside the simulation. Soon, the Lone Wanderer enters a high-tech pod and wakes up inside the simulation, where he has to jump straight into the action. After spending a lot of time in the wasteland, the Lone Wanderer is used to these kind of stressful situations, so he has no problem landing some headshots on the Chinese soldiers. Despite his skills, the Lone Wanderer is outnumbered, and clearing Anchorage is not going to be an easy task. In this DLC, the player can't loot the dead bodies for ammo. Instead, the character has to refuel on a few selected stations. As the battle progresses, the Lone Wanderer blows up some of the Chinese weapons, and this actually earns him a promotion. General Chase makes him the commander of the strike team, but this only means that he has to engage in more fights. Having eliminated a large portion of the Chinese army, the Lone Wanderer targets their fuel tanks so he can make them even weaker. Finally, the Lone Wanderer makes his way into the Chinese compound, where he's tasked with killing the Chinese general. Once he accomplishes that, General Chase informs him that the simulation has been completed successfully. The Lone Wanderer then wakes up in the pod, where McGraw awaits him and asks him to open the armory. While our hero opens the armory and grabs some weapons, Sibley turns against McGraw because he doesn't want the Lone Wanderer to leave their base with any of their technology. The Lone Wanderer is clever enough to attack first, resulting in the deaths of Sibley and his followers. McGraw thanks him for the assistance because he knows Sibley would have had the upper hand if the Lone Wanderer wasn't present. Finally, the Protector proclaims that the Lone Wanderer is welcome to visit them anytime if he ever needs anything. Fallout 3: The Pit. The Pit is another DLC for Fallout 3. This time, the Lone Wanderer suddenly hears a general distress signal addressed to anyone who can help. The signal is sent by a man named Werner, who says that he's located in a settlement in the northwest. He claims he has valuable information he's willing to share with anyone who can help him free his people. This sounds interesting, so the Lone Wanderer tries to follow the signal. On his way, he hears about Paradise Falls, the home of these slavers. Nobody is accepted there unless they intend to buy or sell slaves. Then, the Lone Wanderer heads to a broadcast tower, assuming that he might find Werner there. He is right, and he soon finds Werner being hunted by some Enclave soldiers and helps him out. When he is safe, Werner explains that he comes from a place called the Pit. The radiated water and air there cause people to mutate and live miserable lives. The man who controls the Pit, Asher, contributes to that misery by keeping his people as slaves. However, the worst part is that Asher actually has a cure that could help the mutants. Werner wants the Lone Wanderer to infiltrate the Pit and steal the cure, but he can't just walk in there. He suggests that the Lone Wanderer disguises himself as a slave and lets a slaver sell him into the Pit. This plan sounds good, so the Lone Wanderer steals some slave clothes and enters the Pit. There, he meets with Medea, Werner's contact on the inside. Medea warns the Lone Wanderer about Trogs, the mutated beings lurking around the Pit. Since the Lone Wanderer has entered the Pit without any weapons, he meets with a man named Marco to grab a small weapon he can use to defend himself. As he searches for Asher's office, he has to invade the slaver bosses and kill the Trogs that attack him. When the Lone Wanderer meets with Medea again, she informs him that Asher's going to open up the arena. Any slave can fight in the arena against the gladiators if they wish to. If a slave wins, they earn their freedom. More importantly, they get a private hearing with Asher, which is the only way to get near him. Most of these slaves die in the arena, but those statistics are not enough to stop the Lone Wanderer. He participates in a series of challenges and wins them all. Asher wants to see the winner of the arena, but instead of setting him free, he suggests making him his lieutenant. He suspects the slaves have been making weapons, and he wants a skilled person to help him keep the order. The Lone Wanderer accepts his terms, and Asher promises to allow him to have the cure so he can become healthy. However, as soon as the Lone Wanderer gets his chance, He kills Asher, signaling the beginning of the slaves' revolution. The raiders working for Asher try to stop him, but the lone wanderer defeats them all before stealing the cure and fleeing with it. As it turns out, the cure is not an item at all. It's actually a baby named Marie. Medea will have to do some research and develop a real cure by examining the kid's DNA because the baby is not infected by the radiation. Finally, Werner announces that these slaves are going to stick around the city because this is their home. They will try to rebuild and organize a better way of living. Having freed the slaves, the lone wanderer leaves, hoping that his efforts will contribute to a better future for them. Fallout 3: Point Lookout. The title of this DLC comes from the main explorable area where the player wanders, the Point Lookout State Park. Although this area has not been attacked directly during the Great War, the radiation has affected humans, and the people living around here are struggling to survive. The radiation has also created a few new creatures, which the player has to deal with. Point Lookout expansion does not provide a large main mission for the player, but rather many smaller ones, as the lone wanderer encounters several characters who ask him for help. For example, a woman named Catherine talks to him about her daughter Nadine, who has disappeared. After the woman gives him a description of her daughter, the lone wanderer sets on his path to find her. The lone wanderer also learns that Point Lookout attracts many treasure hunters, but rarely any of them have any luck and actually find something. Next, the lone wanderer finds a big mansion and decides to investigate it. Inside the mansion, a man named Desmond is being attacked by a group of mutants. Desmond tells the lone wanderer that they have to work together if they want to stay alive. He asks the hero to discover where these mutants are entering the mansion from and cover that spot. The mutants are attacking one after the other, but their lack of strategy makes it easier for the lone wanderer to defeat them. He eventually finds the breach and blocks it, but his job is not done yet since he has to kill the remaining mutants that got in. Once that's done, Desmond explains the situation. The mutants who attacked him belong to a group named Tribals. They want Desmond dead, but he has no idea why. He wants to find out the reason, so he asks the lone wanderer to work with him and infiltrate the Tribals. In return, Desmond will pay him. The lone wanderer agrees, and he also asks about Nadine, the little girl he is looking for. Desmond talks about a girl who came asking questions, but she disappeared before he could get in touch with her. The lone wanderer visits the cathedral as instructed by Desmond and asks to be let in. After being put through a weird ritual, the Tribals allow him to enter. Inside the cathedral, the lone wanderer finds Nadine and tells her that her mother is looking for her. Nadine informs him that she's alright and that she is willingly staying with the Tribals for now. She expected to find something different here, but these people resemble any other cult. Nadine will stick around for a few more days and then will consider leaving. The wanderer wants to find the leader of the Tribals, but nobody knows where he is except for Nadine, who has secretly followed him into his meditation cave. The girl refers to the leader by the name Jackson and tells the wanderer where to find him. He tracks Jackson in his secret cave and finds him kneeling in front of a projection device. The Tribals have interpreted this projection device as something divine, while in reality, this device is a piece of technology used by Professor Culvert to preserve his brain. Culvert's goal is to send a signal over Maryland that would allow him to control the mutants and the people of the area, but Desmond has a jamming device that prevents him from doing so. This is why Culvert was constantly attacking him. As it turns out, Culvert and Desmond are old rivals and they're trying to destroy one another. After speaking to Desmond again, the player can choose to team up with him or Culvert. This choice gradually leads to the final battle where the player will kill one or the other. In any case, the lone wanderer does his job, greets Nadine goodbye, and goes about his way. Fallout 3: Mothership Zeta. The story of Mothership Zeta starts with the lone wanderer exploring a site where a UFO has crashed. All of a sudden, a beam of light circles him and pulls him upward. When he wakes up, he realizes that he is restrained on a UFO and has been abducted by aliens. The aliens converse in an unknown language as the lone wanderer struggles to keep his eyes open. After falling asleep again, the lone wanderer wakes up in a cell with a woman named Soma. Soma says that if they are lucky, they will be left alone for a while. If not, they will become experiments like other prisoners. Soma has not found a way out yet, but now that there are two of them, she knows something they could try. She believes that the aliens need them alive for whatever reason, so maybe they will intervene if they believe that their subjects are going to kill each other. So, the two prisoners agree to fake a fight, and two aliens soon come inside a cell to calm them down. At that moment, the lone wanderer attacks the aliens, eliminates them, and steals their weapons. While navigating the spaceship, they realize that the aliens have abducted quite a few people, many of whom find it hard to accept reality. Our hero also stumbles on a little girl named Sally and releases her from her cell. The girl claims that she knows her way around the spaceship because she has escaped it a couple of times. Sally takes the lone wanderer to the big engine room where he retrieves his equipment. That's probably a very good idea since the aliens have sounded their alarm system and they're storming in to stop their prisoners. Soon, Sally takes the lone wanderer to a room with cryogenic pods where a few prisoners from different time periods are being kept: a samurai, a soldier, a cowboy, and an astronaut. The lone wanderer's next task is to destroy 3 generators inside the ship and then take the rest of the prisoners to the upper section. There, they witness a broadcast of an angry alien speaking to his crew. Although they do not understand the content of the message, Soma assumes that this is good news because they're getting under their skin. Our hero moves further inside the ship and deals with a heavy wave of hostile aliens. He then makes his way into the main control room and clears the path for the rest of the characters. In the meantime, another spaceship has approached and is trying to destroy them. The team works fast to figure out how the laser weapon functions, and they destroy the other spaceship just in time. Sally calls the lone wanderer the captain of the spaceship, but the hero chooses to go back to Earth using teleportation technology, concluding the story of this DLC. The protagonist finds himself near his old vault and decides to pay a visit. When the protagonist meets his old friend, Amada, she informs him that she is the new overseer, taking upon the role of her father. Amada adds that she's going to make some changes. She's going to open the vault for good and allow people to go out to the wasteland. Finally, Amada proclaims that she understands why James did what he did, but still, she can't allow the lone wanderer to be anywhere near the vault. Many residents would not accept him back, and it would cause many problems. With that said, Amada asks the lone wanderer to leave, and he complies, returning to the wasteland once more. With the creation kit in hand, the wanderer goes back to the Brotherhood of Steel. There, they activate a big robot to protect them on their way to the Jefferson Memorial Building. The path to the building is not easy, as some remaining members of the Enclave try to stop them. However, they are unsuccessful in their attempts. Once he is inside the building, the lone wanderer comes to terms with what has to happen next. Since his father had unleashed radiation inside the main control room, it means that whoever enters it is going to die. However, in order to finish setting up the purifier, someone has to do it. The lone wanderer can't bear to ask anyone else to do it, so he enters the room himself. He acts fast, connecting the purifier to the creation kit, but as expected, he dies shortly after finishing the job. The lone wanderer's story will live long as the tale of a man who sacrificed himself for the greater good of mankind. Fallout 3: Broken Steel. So, you may be wondering, how is there another DLC for Fallout 3? Didn't the lone wanderer die in the end? Well, the reason behind this is that this DLC reveals that the lone wanderer didn't actually die during the ending of the base game and has fallen into a coma instead. The story starts with him waking up 2 weeks later in Citadel, where he is greeted by Elder Lyons. Sarah Lyons, who worked with the lone wanderer, is also in a coma. The good news is that the purifier worked and more areas now have clean water. The bad news, however, is that the Enclave is trying to dominate and they are fighting against the Brotherhood of Steel. The Elder says that they can use any person who can fight. The lone wanderer can't turn down such an invitation, so the Elder makes him a knight of the Brotherhood. After receiving this information, the lone wanderer is sent to meet with Scribe Rothschild, who will brief him on his mission. Rothschild exclaims that the Brotherhood has discovered several Enclave bases around Citadel. They believed that these bases have no communication with their leadership, but this is not the case. The lone wanderer will be a part of a team under the codename Liberty Prime, and they will invade an Enclave facility. After eliminating all the resistance, they should destroy their communication systems and bring back any relevant data they acquire. Next, the lone wanderer finds Paladin Tristan, the man who will lead the Liberty Prime team. Tristan instructs our hero to stay covered behind him and allow their robot to do most of the heavy lifting. The robot does a good job indeed, but it is destroyed when the Enclave calls an orbital strike. Tristan then orders the lone wanderer to go inside the facility to find the source of the transmission. However, the operation does not unfold as expected. Without their robot and with Enclave soldiers being armed to the teeth, many Brotherhood knights fall. The Lone Wanderer returns to Scribe Rothschild with the data he has extracted, and Elder Lyons wants to talk to him. The old man has run out of courage, but our hero convinces him that they need to keep fighting and that they must discover what the Enclave hit them with. The Brotherhood trusts the Lone Wanderer, so they give him some of their best weapons for his next couple of missions. He is eventually tasked with finding the Tesla Cannon. This cannon is a powerful weapon that can help the Brotherhood eliminate their enemies. The Lone Wanderer finds the Tesla Cannon, but he has to put it to good use immediately as he is surrounded by Enclave soldiers. On top of that, the Lone Wanderer also discovers the main Enclave facility where an orbital strike can be called from. By fighting his way through hell, he reaches the main computer and activates an orbital strike to hit this same facility. As he runs away to safety, Sarah Lyons appears with a helicopter and helps him escape. After delivering this severe hit on the Enclave, the Brotherhood of Steel is now confident that they can deal with the remaining enemies. Elder Lyons proclaims that the Lone Wanderer already proved himself back in the battle for Project Purity, but once more, he did not disappoint them. With this major win for the Brotherhood, Elder tells the hero that he is one of them. Fallout: New Vegas, 2281. Despite the efforts the characters of the previous games made, humans are still divided into groups. One such group is the New California Republic, or NCR for short. We've met them in the previous games as well. The NCR sent its scouts across the wasteland to look for places where they could live, and the scouts came back with information about a place called the Mojave Desert. As it appears, this place was almost untouched by the atomic war. The NCR soon moved to that location and made it habitable again. However, this area is of great interest to other people as well, which is why two more groups are interested in having the Mojave Desert under their control. One of those groups is Caesar's Legion, inspired by the Roman Legion, while the other party is Mr. House, who commands a big army of robots called Securitrons. The protagonist of this story is a courier who, as always, remains unnamed during the game. The courier has been hired to deliver the so-called platinum chip to New Vegas and a guy named Benny. However, as soon as the courier delivers it, Benny and his men suddenly attack him. They seemingly kill him and bury him in a shallow grave. Thankfully, the courier wakes up in Dr. Mitchell's little infirmary. The old man has taken good care of him, and the courier is now ready to leave. But before he gets out to the wasteland to look for Benny, Dr. Mitchell asks him some questions that pretty much serve as a personality test. The results of this test help the player distribute their available points to different attributes. Since the courier is not really accustomed to battle, he first goes to meet a woman named Sunny. Sunny teaches him how to shoot before sending him on his way to buy a few weapons. The courier also meets a robot called Victor. As it appears, Victor was the one who pulled him from his grave and brought him to Dr. Mitchell. Then, the courier visits an area named Prim to visit the post office that hired him for the platinum chip delivery. When he gets to the office, a man named Nash tells him that the guy who was hired to deliver the chip initially canceled, so the office hired a protagonist to do it instead. Other than that, Nash can't help the courier any further, but prompts him to go meet Deputy Beagle, who might have more information. The courier finds the deputy tied up since he's been attacked by the escaped convicts. After he's released, Deputy recalls that Benny and a couple of his goons passed through Prim. They were talking about a delivery they took from a guy, most probably the courier. They also talked about meeting a contact in a town called Novak, so the courier decides to follow them. Once the courier gets to Novak, he gets caught up in many conversations while trying to find out where Benny is located. After several side missions, the courier meets Lieutenant Monroe, who tells him that he should talk to Jessup, the leader of the Great Khans. As it turns out, members of the Great Khans were helping Benny the night when the courier got shot. Jessup remembers the courier when he sees him and is a bit scared because the courier is supposed to be dead. Jessup claims that Benny double-crossed him and kept the chip to himself. He has no idea what Benny's going to do with it, but he assumes that the man is back in New Vegas in an area called Strip. After receiving this information, the courier does not attack the Great Khans, deciding to focus on Benny for now. The courier proceeds to visit the Strip, but a robot prevents him from entering. As it appears, they only allow high-profile individuals to enter the city. So, the courier decides to visit a casino to earn some money and then use it to enter the town. The courier then visits the hotel where Benny is staying and talks to an employee named Swank. Swank works for Mr. House, so the courier tells him that he has to find Benny because he's probably working on a plan to harm Mr. House. Swank allows the courier to search Benny's house and asks him to report back to him afterward. The courier stumbles on a robot named Yes Man, which is programmed to be helpful to people. Upon being asked, Yes Man reveals that the Platinum chip is a storage device that contains some code. Mr. House plans to use this code to upgrade his robots. However, Benny wants to keep the chip to himself in order to gain control of the robots. It doesn't take a genius to realize that controlling all the robots would make him very powerful. Right next, the courier finds Benny drinking in a bar. Benny is surprised to see him and tries to convince him that they should work together. He promises that he can offer a VIP lifestyle to the courier. The courier stays loyal to his plan and kills Benny in a rather brutal fashion. The courier not only completes his revenge, but he also retrieves the chip. Right next, the courier receives a message that the leader of Caesar's Legion wants to meet him in person. The courier proceeds to see him, and the leader, Caesar, compliments him for everything he has done. Caesar wants him to head to Lucky 38 Casino and try to enter it. He believes that he could open the casino's huge door with the platinum chip he obtained. And if he manages to get in, Caesar wants him to destroy everything inside this casino. The courier heads to Lucky 38 and is able to enter it just like Caesar told him. Mr. House, who is the owner of this casino, contacts the courier through a screen and tells him to use the platinum chip to upgrade his robots. Mr. House promises that he will reward the courier if he cooperates and threatens to punish him if he refuses. At this point, you, the player, have two choices. Listen to Mr. House and upgrade his robots, or listen to Caesar and destroy them. Choices you make throughout the game, along with this one, will impact which out of the 4 main endings you will get in the end. For the sake of this video, we'll say that Courier destroyed the casino and all the robots inside. However, at the end of the game, I'll briefly touch on some different possibilities. Anyway, having completed his assignments, the courier returns to Caesar. Caesar then tells him that he wants Mr. House dead. Since the courier does not like Mr. House much, he agrees to do it. When he gets back to the strip, he has a short chat with Yes Man. The courier asks if it would be easy to take control of the robots if he would like to be the new boss of New Vegas. Yes Man replies that it would be quite easy, and he would also help him do it. With that in mind, the courier finds Mr. House, and we now see that he is very old. He's only able to live because of a chamber that helps preserve his mind and the basic functions of his body. Mr. House tries to talk the courier out of killing him, saying that he is the future of this area. However, his speech is ineffective, and the courier kills him. Now, before we continue with the rest of the New Vegas storyline, we need to cover some of the game's DLCs. It's not really clear when these DLCs take place within the timeline, but one thing we know for sure is that all of them take place before the finale of the main game. So this would be the perfect time to cover them. Fallout New Vegas Dead Money. This DLC begins with the courier arriving at a camp. There, he finds a tunnel with the words Sierra Madre written above it and enters it. Suddenly, the tunnel is filled with sleeping gas and the courier goes unconscious. He wakes up in front of the projection of a man called Elijah. The man has attached a collar to the courier's neck and warns him that the collar contains explosives that can kill him. Elijah has control over the collar and can make it explode anytime he wishes. The only way the courier can rid himself of the collar is by following Elijah's instructions. The man wants the courier to meet 3 more people, and the group will perform a heist in the Sierra Madre casino. All of them will be trapped in collars, so everything they do will be monitored. This is a dangerous mission since the casino is full of traps, and on top of that, mutants walk around this area. The first mission for the courier is to find Dog at the police station and release it. Dog is a bit out of his mind, but he complies with Elijah's demands when he hears his voice, like a trained dog listening to his master. Dog then helps the courier fight off the mutants on their path to the second recruit, Dean Domino. The ghoul does not like what's happening and how Elijah is playing them, but he knows there's nothing he can do about it. Finally, the courier finds the last recruit, Christine, and sets her free. The team reports back to Elijah, who is very happy to see them, but also reminds them that he can kill them if they disobey him. Then, he sends them off to the casino. The team should coordinate and work together in order to enter the casino because this is not a one-man job. By working with Christine, the courier triggers the gala event and earns himself an opportunity to enter the casino through the main gate. Once they are inside the casino, Elijah instructs the courier to look for valuable items. Suddenly, the courier is attacked by Dog, who can't control himself due to his intense hunger. The courier tricks him into pulling the collar off his neck really hard, which makes it explode, killing Dog. Then, the courier has to battle against some mutants who storm into the casino in order to stay alive. Right next, the courier gains access to the casino's vault, where he realizes that Elijah has been trapped inside the vault, and all of this has been a plan in order to free him. However, not everything goes as planned, and the courier kills him. Eventually, he also removes the collar from his neck and is free to walk away. Fallout New Vegas: Honest Hearts. The second DLC for Fallout New Vegas is Honest Hearts. The courier keeps wandering through the Mojave Desert until he receives an interesting signal. A man claims that he will pay anyone who helps him with a job. The courier soon meets this man, who is called Jed. Jed explains that he and his people want to reach Zion, a town in Utah, with their caravan. The mission is clear. The courier should help them get to Utah, and he will receive an extra payment if he helps them get inside Zion. Jed warns the protagonist that the road ahead is going to be rough because Utah is a relentless state, with enemies lurking everywhere. While they are going through the dangerous wasteland, the courier is told that they're going to meet a group named New Canaan. The courier is warned not to mention the name Joshua Graham or the Burned Man because it will trigger these people. Graham used to be a ruthless warrior for the Legion, but Caesar decided to punish him when he failed an expedition. Caesar wanted him dead, but the rumor has it Graham survived. After that, Caesar was so annoyed that he prohibited everyone from mentioning his name. At some point, the courier gets lost, but he soon stumbles upon Joshua Graham. Graham informs him that the New Canaan group has been destroyed and its remaining members have scattered away. They were attacked by another group called the White Legs. The White Legs wanted to become a part of the Legion, so Caesar asked them to destroy the New Canaans as a challenge to admission. Graham agrees to show the courier the way back, but he has to help him find a few resources first. When the two meet again, Graham expresses that Zion is a monument of natural beauty. It is a place that should be free instead of being under control of the White Legs. He claims that he doesn't like killing, but killing becomes just a chore when it is done to promote God's plan. The courier agrees to stay longer so he can help Graham. After a few short battles against the raiders, Graham wants to take the courier and the rest of his men on a mission to finally liberate Zion from White Legs. The courier obliges happily and kills many enemies to help Graham's cause. Eventually, the two of them get a hold of the White Legs leader, and the player can choose to kill the leader or convince Graham to let him go. The story ends with a narration that describes how several groups continued to live in Zion after the courier departed. Some of them turned against one another, while others followed Graham's word. The courier shifted the balance of power in this area, and his actions, along with his words, influenced Graham. Fallout New Vegas: Old World Blues. The next DLC we are going to cover is Old World Blues, and this is an interesting one. The story opens with a narration that gives us some context. A faculty called the Big Mountain used to be home to some of the brightest minds. A handful of scientists worked in this facility trying to find the ultimate solution to winning the war against China. The narration implies that these scientists created some peculiar creatures, conducting experiments on humans and animals. When America was nuked, the scientists died and their work was discontinued. At the beginning of this DLC, the courier wakes up in a facility full of scars. As the courier tries to find out what's going on, he stumbles upon a robot that serves as a collective consciousness of the scientists who worked in Big Mountain. The consciousness of these doctors is maintained within this robot, Dr. Klein, and the scientists are able to converse with one another. The courier asks them questions and deduces that his brain, heart, and spine have been extracted. The scientists replace them with mechanical parts. This development comes with some advantages for the courier. For example, he can't be poisoned and his head can endure more hits. The scientists are amazed by the fact that the courier can speak logically with them, as apparently not all experiments in this facility go smoothly. While he explores the Big Mountain, the courier encounters several different creatures, and it's clear that this facility holds a lot of secrets. Some of these creatures include weaponized scorpions, mutated vicious plants, and even the patient Zero himself. Big honor to get the chance to kill the first experiment of this facility. However, the courier can also have some fun. He finds some personality modules and installs them in the main intelligence unit. In other words, he personalizes his experiments with the facility's AI. After killing more creatures, the courier helps Dr. Klein with some chores around the facility. Another scientist named Mobius has installed some bad code in Big Mountain, and Klein wants it fixed. In return, Klein promises to put the courier's organic brain back into his head. When he is finally done, the courier finds his brain, but the scientists are reluctant to help him. This leads to a confrontation where the courier has to kill all of the robots storing the consciousness of the scientists. With the scientists dead, there's now no way for the courier to put his real brain back in his head. However, that doesn't stop him from continuing his journey in the other parts of the wasteland. Fallout New Vegas, Lonesome Road. Lonesome Road is the last DLC for Fallout New Vegas. It starts with the courier receiving a message from an unknown courier promising that he's going to tell him what the platinum chip was and what purpose it served in the grand plan of things. If he wants to know, our hero will have to walk a hostile mountain and find a facility. The courier does that and finds a robot called Eddie inside. The courier uses the robot to open a blast door, brings the power back up, and searches the facility for anything useful. Then, the courier receives a new message from the unknown courier. Under the codename Ulysses, the unknown courier appears to be an idealist. He proclaims that our hero walks without carrying a flag on his back. However, everyone should have the shadow of a nation following them. In any case, Ulysses lured him here because he wanted to give our hero a mission. Ulysses wants him to find some warheads and deactivate them before they can do any more damage to the world. The courier asks more questions, but Ulysses tells him that he has hidden the answer in a place known as the Divide. This is a hostile place full of dangers, but the courier has to visit the Divide and be tested by it if he wants to know more. While the courier fights to stay alive, Eddie reveals its own sad story. Apparently, this robot is carrying some deep wounds from the past because everyone treated it like a test subject, neglecting that it is capable of experiencing feelings. Later, Ulysses speaks again through Eddie and gives the courier a mystical speech involving several groups of the wasteland, such as the Legion, New Canaans, and more. The speech can be summarized in a simple sentence. Everybody is looking for something, whether it be silver, gold, or platinum. But this form of intense desire for domination can lead to battles and death. Nevertheless, are humans to blame for losing control, or are these materials guilty of putting humans in temptation? Soon, the courier finds the warheads and releases them to blow in the air without harming anyone. At the same time, Eddie reveals more of his backstory. The robot was deemed a failed project and was supposed to be dismantled for parts. However, its creator wanted it to live, so he instructed it to escape. Weird as it may sound, the courier consoles the robot, telling it that it has done a good job so far and its creator would be proud of it. Right next, the courier finds the Divide and Ulysses communicates with him again. He blames the courier for the destruction that took place around these parts because the platinum chip he carried was a detonator that initiated a fierce war. The courier had no idea about it and doesn't think he's responsible. The courier wonders if this is some form of revenge, but Ulysses prompts him to reach the end of the Divide. When he does, they will have a chance to clear things out. Eventually, Ulysses reveals that he lured the courier here to get his hands on the robot. He wants to have its parts so he can activate the Divide's missile system. Then, he will attack the courier's hometown to get his revenge on him. However, our hero will not allow him to complete his plan and stops him before it's too late. Next, the courier meets Yes Man on his way out, and they decide to take control of the New Vegas. The courier gives the chip to Yes Man, and the robot transfers its consciousness into the central system. The courier lets Yes Man do his work while he gets back to Caesar. Caesar now turns towards the Boomers, a violent group that does not allow anyone to get near their camp. Caesar wants the courier to negotiate with them in order to convince them to join the Legion and declare war on the NCR. On his way, the courier talks to many people and realizes that everyone has their own opinions on the rest of the groups. Nothing is black and white, and it's hard to tell which group is evil and which is good. So, the courier starts thinking that he shouldn't assist any of the big groups. Instead, a better idea would be to fight to keep the Mojave Desert independent. Yes Man has some good news for him when they meet again, and tells him that he's prepared many robots for battle. The Hoover Dam is going to be the place where the courier and the robots attack everyone. The NCR and the Legion are very interested in the Hoover Dam because it is the area where the electricity supply is produced and controlled. The battle rages as the courier and his robots destroy everything on the battlefield. Eventually, everyone falls and the courier wins the war. After this big battle, the NCR and the Legion are forced to retreat since they are almost completely destroyed. The Mojave Desert remains a free area while all the groups around it struggle to survive. Besides this ending, there are many more ending variations you could get based on your in-game choices. However, the three main ones are supporting House, supporting Caesar, or supporting NCR. Each of these endings will pretty much lead to that specific faction taking over New Vegas and pushing the other ones out. Fallout 4, 2287. The game opens with a narration from the sole survivor, the main protagonist of the game. He talks about the World War back in 1945 and how it ended when the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan. After that incident, the states of the world harnessed nuclear power and used it for good instead of making weapons. The story then cuts to the year 2077, before the Great War started. One day, a man knocks on the family's door. He informs them that he's coming on behalf of Vault Tech with an urgent message. To honor the lone survivor for his service in the military, his family's being invited to the local vault, Vault 111. As soon as the man leaves, the president issues a warning on the television because the attacks on the United States have already started. The lone survivor and his wife take their baby and head to Vault 111. Once they arrive, they see a crowd of people begging to get inside the vault, but only people with invitations are allowed to get in. Soon, the family is inside the vault and they are instructed to wear the blue vault uniforms. A doctor asks them to enter into 2 chambers, telling them that the chambers will decontaminate them. However, this proves to be a big lie, as these chambers were actually cryogenic chambers. So, the lone survivor and his wife are frozen. Many years later, the lone survivor opens his eyes inside the chamber and sees 2 men opening his wife's cryogenic chamber. The men abduct his son Sean and kill his wife. The lone survivor falls back into sleep again, but at some point, his cryogenic chamber malfunctions and he wakes up. He walks outside the chamber and makes his way out of the vault. Sadly, he realizes that all the vault residents are dead. The lone survivor roams the wasteland and it all feels very weird. The world looks nothing like the world he left behind. Soon, he meets Garvey and his group called the Minutemen. Garvey complains that his group is being slaughtered because this area is full of ghouls. The lone survivor has no idea what ghouls are, and Garvey explains that they're people infected by the radiation. The lone survivor decides to help them out, so he steps into a big armor. With a big machine gun in his hands, he goes out to the streets and kills some mutants and a few raider gangsters. With a new dog friend called Dogmeat, the lone survivor returns to his old house. He finds his old butler, Robot Codsworth, still functional and has a quick chat with it. The lone survivor's new goal is to find the people who killed his wife and make them pay. After a few missions, the lone survivor eventually finds an android detective, Nick Valentine, and saves him from a building where he's being held. Nick reveals that he came here looking for a missing girl, but he was unable to find her. He then tells the lone survivor about an organization called the Institute. The Institute has been terrorizing the whole city because they kidnap real people and replace them with android versions, which they call synths. The lone survivor tells the detective that he's looking for the man who killed his wife, so the detective invites him back to Diamond City where his office is located so they can search for the murderer. The protagonist travels to Diamond City and meets Nick again in his office. There, he describes the men he saw from inside the cryogenic chamber. Surprisingly, Valentine knows one of the men the lone survivor describes, as he is involved with the Institute. The man's name is Kellogg, and the lone survivor now has a target. With a little bit of help from Dogmeat and Valentine, the lone survivor manages to find Kellogg, and they have a quick chat. Kellogg reveals that Sean, the protagonist's son, is alive, but he's a bit older than the lone survivor would expect. Kellogg says that after Sean was abducted, lone survivor fell back to sleep and slept for 60 more years. The man also reveals that Sean is with the Institute, and he likes it there. After this chat, it's obvious that there's only one way this encounter will end, so both men draw their guns. Kellogg has some assistance from a few synths, but he's eventually killed. With Kellogg dead, the lone survivor wants to find more information on the Institute. The lone survivor then tells Valentine about a cybernetics device he took from Kellogg's brain. With this device, they might be able to access Kellogg's memories. However, they can't do this by themselves, so the lone survivor visits Dr. Amari, who should be able to do it. The doctor plugs him into a device that connects him to Kellogg's memories, and the sole survivor explores the man's brain. He eventually arrives at the moment where Kellogg speaks to his superior. The unknown man orders him to find Dr. Virgil and kill him because the doctor has gone rogue. The connection is soon disrupted, but the lone survivor has seen enough and knows that he has to find Dr. Virgil. He looks everywhere for the man and eventually finds him. As it turns out, Dr. Virgil is infected by radiation, and he's quite scared when he sees the lone survivor. Virgil thinks that Kellogg is having his people find him and kill him, but the protagonist explains that Kellogg is already dead. In fact, he is the one who killed him. The lone survivor goes on to explain that he wants to get into the Institute, but Virgil does not trust him yet. Nevertheless, he changes his mind when he hears that the lone survivor wants to infiltrate the Institute to find his abducted son. Virgil can tell him the way in, but he wants something in return. He says that he was working on a serum that would turn him back into a human before he escaped the Institute. So he asks the lone survivor to search his office for the serum when he breaks into the Institute and then bring it back to him. However, infiltrating the Institute is not going to be an easy task, as apparently the only way to get in is by using a teleporter. The good news is that Virgil can tell him how to build a teleporter from beginning to end. The hardest part of this process is finding a certain chip needed to use the portal. To find that chip, he has to find a courser and extract the chip from its brain. A courser is a synth used by the Institute to kill and abduct targets. Eventually, the lone survivor finds a courser and manages to kill it with some help from a new group, the Railroad. The leaders of this group have their own goals. More specifically, they want to free the synths from the Institute's command. Their goal is questionable because nobody can predict how those synths would behave once freed, but the lone survivor has to work with them for now. After talking to Virgil again, the lone survivor starts building the teleporter. When the teleporter is built, the lone survivor uses it successfully and teleports into the Institute. Soon, he is able to find his son Sean, who is a teenager now. The lone survivor starts talking to his son while the boy utters the word father. However, the interaction seems a bit off, as if they're not talking about the same thing. The lone survivor tells the boy that he is his father, but the boy keeps screaming for help. Suddenly, an older version of Sean appears and starts talking about the boy. He says that this creation is impressive, but it still needs work. Then, he speaks a code, and the boy deactivates. As it appears, this older Sean is the real Sean, and he's actually the director of the Institute. His nickname is Father because he is the creator of all the synths. The lone survivor is very confused, but Sean starts explaining everything. He was abducted by the Institute 60 years ago from the cryogenic chamber because this organization wanted to conduct some studies. The important detail was that they needed human DNA for those studies. Although they could find other humans, their DNA was corrupted, so they needed Sean because he had been inside the cryogenic chamber since the war. Sean believed in the case of the Institute as he grew up and ended up becoming the new director of the organization. The lone survivor needs some time to digest all of this information, so Sean invites him to stay and take a look around before he jumps to any conclusions. While browsing the Institute, the lone survivor realizes that these scientists are working on many different projects, such as growing healthy plants, and they have advanced technology available. Later, the lone survivor meets with Sean again, who tells him about the Railroad group. The group abducts his synths and they erase their memories, believing that they can help them live free like humans. Even though it sounds like an idealistic goal, they are mistaken. The synths can be dangerous if they don't follow Sean's programming. Even though they resemble humans closely, they aren't real humans. The lone survivor wants to help Sean, so he takes on a few missions to bring back some synths that have been abducted by the Railroad group. However, when he saves them, the synths feel afraid and don't want to go back to the Institute. With this, the lone survivor isn't sure what he should do, and eventually lets the synths go. Then, he meets with Sean and tells him what he did, and his son feels disappointed. He believes that the lone survivor made the wrong choice, telling him that these synths are just machines. Although the lone survivor and his son don't engage in a fight over this, they part ways, knowing that their paths might cross at some point in the near future. The lone survivor then checks on Virgil after bringing him the serum from the Institute and sees he has turned back into a human form. Virgil has made a good first step toward turning the irradiated humans back into their natural form. Soon, the lone survivor joins forces with the Minutemen, and they have to defend their settlement from synths sent by the Institute. After an intense battle sequence, they repel the attackers, and Garvey tells the lone survivor that they have to take the fight to the Institute. The lone survivor agrees with that, and he opens the way for the rest of the Minutemen to infiltrate the Institute. The building is filled with synths guarding the entrance, but they are no big deal for the lone survivor's shooting skills. Garvey believes that the people in the Institute have everything they need to live happy lives, so he can't comprehend why they would attack the other groups. But, according to the lone survivor, the problem is that the people of the Institute believe they are better than the rest. Eventually, the time comes when the lone survivor has to face his son. It is revealed that Sean is in pain because he is suffering from cancer. The lone survivor is sorry that things have come to this, so he makes Sean a final offer to work together. If Sean helps him out, fewer people will die in the wasteland. Sean will not cooperate with him under any circumstances, leaving the lone survivor with no option but to start an auto-destruction sequence on the Institute's reactor. The lone survivor makes it out of there with the remaining members of the Minutemen and watches the Institute explode and burn to ashes. The game ends with a narration from the lone survivor. He says that this is feeling like the end of the world all over again. He had hopes of living a better life with his son, but life is full of surprises and is not guaranteed to give you what you seek. Alternatively, the player can achieve a completely different ending by staying on the Institute's side the entire game and not betraying them. This will lead to the lone survivor eventually becoming the new director of the Institute and destroying some of the other factions like the Brotherhood of Steel and Railroad. There are more different endings as well, but these are the two main ones. Fallout 4 Automatron. Automatron is the first DLC of Fallout 4, and it starts with the sole survivor receiving a distress signal. A caravan is being attacked by hostile robots, and they need some serious help. The sole survivor runs to the caravan, but it is already destroyed, and the humans are killed. After defeating the robots, the sole survivor meets Ada, a robot that has been tasked to protect the caravan, but failed in her mission. Ada reveals that these evil robots are created by the Mechanist, somebody who likes to create robots and terrorize the Commonwealth. This Mechanist needs to be stopped, and the sole survivor agrees to help. The robot tells the protagonist that they need to grab some devices installed in the Robo-Brains, the Mechanist's robots, and use them to triangulate the Mechanist's location. Their journey takes them to the den of the Rust Devils, a group of raiders thriving in Commonwealth. Upon defeating the first wave of Rust Devils, the sole survivor finds a robot called Jezebel. Jezebel calculates that the sole survivor is looking for the Mechanist and promises to help uncover his location if the sole survivor finds her a new body. Instead of doing that, the sole survivor builds her a new body instead. Now that Jezebel is free, she gives our hero the coordinates to find the Mechanist. She also reveals that she was given instructions by the Mechanist to help humans. However, Jezebel calculated that the best way to help humans is to destroy 75% of them because most of them would die from causes beyond her control anyway. After listening to this twisted logic, the sole survivor and Ada find a facility that served as a military operational center before the Great War. This facility used prisoners and asylum inmates as test subjects, conditioning their brains to make them ready for transfer into robotic bodies, creating the Robo-Brains. The trauma created through this process is responsible for the failure of the Robo-Brains. Instead of protecting humans, they attack humans. So, the sole survivor has to deal with a large wave of hostile robots before meeting the Mechanist. As the sole survivor is about to attack the Mechanist, more robots get in the way to protect their creator. Eventually, the sole survivor defeats them all and has a face-to-face confrontation with the Mechanist. The Mechanist removes her mask and reveals herself to be Isabel Cruz. She explains that all of this is just a big misunderstanding. Isabel has been creating these robots to protect Commonwealth, but the Robo-Brains have misinterpreted her commands, protecting humans by killing them. Seeing that she has failed, Isabel gives the sole survivor a code to override the security protocols and shut the robots down. With the Robo-Brains out of the equation, Isabel will take some time to emotionally recover and will then join the sole survivor to help him with everything he needs to make Commonwealth a better place to live. Fallout 4: Nuka-World. The next DLC for Fallout 4 is titled Nuka-World. After his latest adventures, the sole survivor meets with an injured man named Harvey near the Nuka-World transit station. Harvey informs him that there are people living at the old Nuka-World amusement park, but they're being exploited by the overboss. The sole survivor offers to help, so Harvey gives him the code of the monorail that can take him to Nuka-World. While the sole survivor navigates the park, a man named Gage communicates with him to tell him that he has an interesting offer for him. However, he has to survive the Gauntlet first, which is a series of traps designed to keep people outside Nuka-World. Our hero survives the test and then has a quick meeting with the overboss Coulter from a distance. Coulter promises to kill the sole survivor, while Gage gives him directions so he can enter Nuka-World. Eventually, the sole survivor has to fight the overboss. His old butler robot, Codsworth, helps him out, and they defeat the overboss. However, Gage now appears and tells the sole survivor that he is the new overboss. They need somebody in this position because their job is not done yet, as Nuka-World is being torn apart by the gang wars. The most powerful ones are the Disciples, the Operators, and the Pack. Apart from violence and killings, the sole survivor decides to try a different approach. He speaks to the leaders of the gangs one by one and promises them that he's going to be fair. However, when he talks to the leader of the pack, Mason, he learns something interesting. Apparently, Gage was the one who made Coulter an overboss. But when Coulter got soft, Gage threatened to replace him. Then the sole survivor appeared, and Gage made him the new overboss. This information makes the sole survivor doubt Gage's intentions, and he decides to keep an eye on him. Next, Gage sends the protagonist to take care of a section of the amusement park that has been occupied by ghouls. The sole survivor fights his way to that section until he meets the man who is in charge, a ghoul named Oswald. The two of them have a chat, and Oswald claims that he's only trying to help his people. The feral ghouls in this section should not be abandoned, but rather cared for. Oswald wants to find a cure for them instead of allowing the gangs to kill them. Later, the sole survivor meets Cito, a man who's been raised by gorillas. Cito is trying to defend the zoo from some attacking monsters, and the protagonist helps him out. From there, the sole survivor increases his influence over Nuka-World and Commonwealth. He is respected by most, but the balance is threatened when Nisha, the leader of the Disciples, attacks the rival gang, the Operators. The sole survivor is forced to do the Operators justice, so he joins them to attack Nisha and wipe the Disciples out. Finally, everybody's happy with the overboss, and they accept him as their leader, the best they ever had. Fallout 4: Far Harbor. Far Harbor starts as any other DLC, with the sole survivor receiving a radio message. This one is from Valentine's detective agency asking for help. Our hero visits the agency, and Valentine tells him about the Nakano family. The parents are looking for their daughter, who went missing. The sole survivor takes on the case and visits the Nakano family to learn more about their situation. The father, Kenji, believes that his daughter, Kasumi, was lured away and abducted by a kidnapper. On the other hand, the mother, Rei, believes that her daughter wanted to live her own life and left willingly. In any case, they'd like to know if Kasumi is fine. His research leads the sole survivor to the docks, where he meets Captain Avery. He helps the captain defend the docks from some beasts, and she rewards him by sending him to meet a man named Longfellow. After a brief chat, this man sends the sole survivor to the Acadia colony of synths. There, the protagonist finds Dima, the leader of Acadia. Dima proclaims that Kasumi is here, and she's free to do whatever she wants. If she wants to leave, so be it. The sole survivor finds Kasumi, and she reveals that she came here on her own because Acadia is a refuge for synths. Furthermore, she clarifies that she is a synth, created to replicate the dead daughter of the Nakano family. Kasumi feels like this place is her home, and she wants to protect it. In the meantime, a cutscene reveals to us that Dima, the leader of Acadia, is just trying to keep the balance between Acadia, Far Harbor, and the Children of Atom community. His trusted friends ask him to pick a side because the Atoms and Far Harbor are caught up in a rivalry. The problem right now is that Dima has hidden his memories in the submarine base where the Children of Atom reside. He is afraid that if they access his memories, they will be able to destroy Far Harbor. The sole survivor discovers this and heads to the submarine base. He also finds out that Dima's memories contain the codes to a warhead missile. Apparently, if the children of Adam find those codes, they can use the warhead to destroy Far Harbor. However, the sole survivor uncovers one more secret. In the past, Dima has actually killed the leader of Far Harbor, Avery, and replaced her with a synth. He did this in order to make sure nothing would threaten the peace. Afterwards, Dima could not live with the guilt, so he removed his memories. From here, the game can unfold in two different ways depending on the choices the player makes. The player can choose to expose Dima's secret, which will cause Far Harbor to turn against him, or keep his secret safe and help him kill the ruthless leader of the Atoms, Tectus. If the player chooses to kill Tectus, Dima will replace him with a synth as well to preserve peace. Finally, the sole survivor returns to Far Harbor with Kasumi, who wants to live happily with her family.